My father would say, by the time you think your father is right, you probably already have a son who thinks you're wrong.
I think if they were willing to hear certain things that I had to say or we had to say as kids, that things that perhaps they thought we were not ready for,
Yeah.
it could have helped.
Do you think you would have understood?
That's a funny question, but that's a good question because I think sometimes we underestimate the intelligence of children or younger people.
At the same time, the children also overestimate their ability to handle things.
But that's where the understanding comes in. Because if you at least hear me out to some degree, right, you can still tell me no.
Yeah.
I don't mind you telling me no, but if you hear me out, at least, I would appreciate the fact that I'm listened to.
When it comes to parenting, sometimes we as kids are only privy to the choice our parents made. We never had access to the options they had to choose from.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that even though kids want to be carried along in the running of the household, unfortunately they are kids. When you get a chance to be a father, a parent, then you can call the shots. Every child gets their esteem from the perception of who their daddy is.
You were making the point, about kids today or young people or people in general, and you see how people behave. And you're like, I thank God that
I'm not them.
that I'm not them, and I grew up in this way. And at the same time, I've learned not to be condescending because they didn't grow up how I grew up.
In that regard,
understand.
in that regard, I refuse to be understanding.
What regard is that?
In regards to those people who are badly behaved.
No, but when I say understanding, you have to understand how they grew up.
Yes, I understand how they grew up, but that understanding does not extend to a point where I am merciful towards them. When the conversations around fatherhood is had, it's usually had in a silo, usually between fathers and other fathers, for the most part. But unfortunately, fatherhood is not being done in a silo. It is done with other parties involved, sons, daughters, wives, sometimes grandparents as well. And it is important in this kind of conversations, even though this podcast is designed specifically to engender father-to-father conversations, but it's also important sometimes to bring on voices who aren't fathers, mothers, sisters, and the rest. And today, I have the opportunity of bringing on someone for the first time who isn't the father yet, but he's the first of many. He's the first podcaster that I'm having on the podcast. He's the first Nigerian I'm having on the podcast as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. Gideon,
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
what's your relationship with your father like? Just give me an idea.
I have a great relationship with my dad, actually. But we spoke briefly about how sons tend to view their fathers before the show. I think the way I've viewed my dad has changed over the years,
Right.
So just as you pointed out or gave an analogy of, when I was very young, I looked at my dad as I couldn't see anything wrong about him. I couldn't see anything wrong. I didn't get to spend that much time with him anyways because he was always working. You're Nigerian, so you understand this. And then as you get older, you expect certain things naturally from your dad, and maybe when you don't get the feedback you expect, you start to wonder like, where's the disconnect,
Right.
But I think I've come to a place now that as an adult, I have a great relationship with my dad. I think we are not just father and son, but we're almost friendly in a sense,
Yeah.
So I can talk to him about certain things, and he can talk to me too, and can rely on me to give my honest opinion on things, and I value that a lot.
I like what you just said. You said you guys are friendly. It is very important people realize that your father, like your pastor, can be friendly, but he's not your friend. People evolve and then get to see other contexts and like, oh, I understand why my dad did X, Y, Z. So give me an idea. If your father was sitting here, what would be some of the questions you would ask him? Shoot.
It's funny we're talking about this because not too long ago, I don't see my dad that often,
Yeah.
but I mean, not too long ago, he did visit and we had a conversation, and I said to him, it would have seemed like a strange thing to talk about, but I said, Dad, growing up as a young man, you never really said anything to me about women, for instance. How do I pick a good woman or anything like that? And it was a bit strange, but And I felt, I wasn't saying it to say that, oh, you did wrong here. I just was like,
Mhm.
I never really knew anything, got anything from you in this regard. And most of the stuff I had to learn from either just my own thoughts or following people who are older than me at the time or whatnot. And sometimes you learn silly things from people because you're just looking at the guy who's just immediately above you. And, but after that conversation, I got to understand something about my dad that I appreciate now. And it's pretty much that, you know, perspective is everything, right?
Right.
And I realized that from his perspective, he didn't look at these things as things that were so that you had to worry about per se. He just looked at it from the lens of the gospel. So if you are picking a spouse or whatever it is, or you're looking for a spouse, that you need to find a woman who's inclined towards Christ, and that's really it. And maybe she's a good fit for you, and that's about it. And I thought to myself, but you know, Dad, there's so much more than that to that to, than this. You know,
No, because I was about to say that's very simplistic
it's
way of
simplistic,
saying
and
it.
that's what I expressed to him. And then, but I could tell, you know, one thing I had to give my dad credit for is that he's a very humble man.
Mm.
I realized this because, I mean, how many times would you have? I don't know if many people can attest to this with their own parents and stuff. But growing up in an African home, I know how African parents are, you know, with their kids.
Right.
So I know most of the time it's my way or the highway with parents. There's no real middle ground, and I experienced that like every other kid at some point. But my dad, I mean, has come said this to each and every one of us, myself, my siblings included, that if there was any failing that he had as a dad, that he apologizes. He literally said that, and I cannot imagine what kind of humility it takes to say that, you
Mm.
know. And for me now looking at it, I appreciate that more than the things that I thought that I wanted, you know? Because I'm looking at it now and I'm saying, when I'm a father, I know I'm not gonna get it right all the time.
No,
I can't.
no one will.
Yeah.
You know, my father would say, by the time you think your father is right, you probably already have a son who thinks you're wrong.
Mm, mm,
So you grow and then you start seeing things from the standpoint of, oh, snap. This was why Popsy was
yeah,
acting the way he was acting. This is how why he was so uptight about finances because bills are not joking with anybody. But as a child, you don't have the context of consequences. So he's like, no parties, no this, no that, no explanation, just rules. And you're like, this homeboy is just, you know, a pain in the backside.
yeah.
But now, as you've grown up, like, oh, I see people on the internet act a fool. I'm like, thank God I was raised properly. Because this could be me. You could obviously see a very clear line between people who had proper parents and, you know,
People who did it.
maybe their parents passing or something, or they were in the system, but they had no upbringing whatsoever. So now, also in that same breath, tell me some of the things you think your father would have done better that you've, as an adult, come to find out that yeah, maybe.
Hmm. I would say regarding my dad, I would also even include I wouldn't exclusively keep this to my dad. I'll say also perhaps my mom as well. I think my parents, I think if they were willing to hear certain things, that I had to say or we had to say as kids, you know, that things that perhaps they thought we were not ready for,
Yeah.
you know, it could have helped because if I could have confided in them from a younger age or at a younger age, I think it would have made me more comfortable with listening to what they had to say. So if they listened to me express something and they were like, okay, I understand why you feel this way, X, Y, Z, but this is why this is not good and this and they were more explanatory about something. I think that would have helped as opposed to don't do this, don't do this. Even though I understand now, just like you said, in hindsight, you know, they say hindsight is always 2020, right? I understand why they did certain things, but if they were more open to discussion at a younger age, I think that would have been great.
Do you think you would have understood?
You know, that's a funny question, but that's a good question because I think sometimes we underestimate the intelligence of children or younger people.
But at the same time, the children also overestimate their ability to
Granted,
handle
granted.
things.
But that's where the understanding comes in. Because if you at least hear me out to some degree, right, you can still tell me no.
Yeah.
I don't mind you telling me no. But if you hear me out, at least, I would
Mm.
appreciate the fact that I'm listened to. And
Mhm.
the reason I know this is because even the times when I was told no as a kid, the times when I was listened to, I appreciated the fact that at least I could speak. You know, it made me feel like, okay, you're hearing me out. You say no, I'm upset. In the moment that you say, no, I don't like you, but, I still appreciate the fact you allowed me to speak, and voice an opinion.
But when it comes to parenting, and then I'm playing devil's advocate right now. When it comes to parenting, sometimes we as kids are only privy to the choice our parents made. We never had access to the options they had to choose from. And sometimes, one, showing your kids all the options available can have a far-reaching unintended consequence. And I'll give an example. Most kids think their fathers are wealthy. And that idea gives them a sense of confidence in the world generally. But if your parent truly showed you their economic standing, you might not know this, but it could damage your self-worth while you're still very fragile. Now, are you telling me that if your parents showed you all of that at the time when you wanted to be shown, would you be the person you are today?
So this is a great question. I heard a joke one time made by a famous comedian. I'm sure you know him, Dave Chappelle.
Right.
And he said this joke resonated with me a lot because he said he grew up well enough just to grow up around rich white people.
He said we were rich enough
Us
to
to
grow
grow
up
up poor
around white people.
rich white people.
Yeah.
And this is funny because when I was a kid, there was a distinct part of my life where I remember vividly where I grew up around rich kids. And I knew even as a kid that I couldn't have the things they had. So for me, I look at it from a slightly different perspective because I knew my parents did the best, that they were doing the best they could. I honestly say that now, like in hindsight, that even subconsciously I knew they were doing the best they could to put us in the best positions that they could. But I understood that, look, I am in a league with, let's say, my colleagues are in a different league, let's say, so to speak, to me. And that actually is what was difficult. And I never blamed my parents for that. Funny enough, as a kid, it just created a desire in me to want things, to have more, you know. So from an economic standpoint, it's funny. I don't know. I feel as though I don't know if I can relate to that perspective of feeling like, my parents have it all, so I can do whatever I want.
Oh no, no,
You know,
no, not have it all. Nobody ever has it all.
that's an
Right?
exaggeration.
No,
Yeah.
no, even the so-called rich people don't have it all. I'm saying from the standpoint of the cost they had to pay
Mm-hmm.
will never be known to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm saying that even though kids want to be carried along in the running of the household, unfortunately, they are kids. When you get a chance to be a father, a parent, then you can call the shots. But in my household, of course, it's not my way or the highway, but I'm saying I have to do the heavy lifting in terms of finances and even decision makings. And I don't always have to carry along,
Yeah.
you know.
I can piggyback on that point you just made because now I think it's clearer to me what you were trying to say. Yes, as a kid, as a matter of fact, there were many instances where, for instance, you think to yourself, why can't I just have this thing? This thing's it's not that expensive, right? Why can't you just get it for me? But your parents are like, no, and you're wondering what is it? You don't really understand financial stuff, and you understand nothing. You don't get it. You just know you want something, and you can't have what you want. And it's funny because in those moments you try and think about what goes through the mind of a child, and I can't speak for every child because I know we all have different dispositions, right? But I remember just thinking to myself, well, I can't have it. I want it. I can't have it. I hope I can have it. That's it. Because I also understood if you have, I think if you have good parents, I think no matter how upset you can be at them, there is some innate understanding even within a kid that the parent is doing the best they can for them. Especially if you understand what it is to be loved from a young age. Unfortunately, some children don't have that, so they don't have anything to juxtapose their current situation with what they expect life to be. So they look at things and be like, well, I never had this, never had this, never had this. So they don't understand that foundation of love. And I think I always understood that because I felt the love of my parents from a young age, even without knowing all the things that I wanted,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and everything. So I was able to balance that. It helped me have balance even when you feel, I don't want to say you sense inadequacy, right? But inadequacy is the wrong word, insufficiency, right? When you sense that. And Yeah, it's a strange thing, but
Our parents are not all knowing. They're not all having, they're not all powerful. They have got their own flaws. They're also going through the human experience.
Mhm.
And then there are moments where we genuinely know Popsy dropped the ball.
Mhm.
So even the inadequacies of our fathers or our parents are things we look at, even though we didn't like it in the moment, we're like, okay, I get what happened,
Mhm.
you know. So are there parts of your upbringing that you were like, Popsy's inadequacy is showing up, and
Oh
I'm like,
yeah, of course. Many of those moments, there were quite a few actually, because some of them were unjustified, by the way, but because it's all a matter of perception, isn't it? Sometimes you think that it may be unjustified at the time. It's most of the time it is unjustified because you're not in his position, right? So you're just looking at it from your perspective. So
Mhm.
let's say look at my parents. If I look at my dad and some things that he has done regarding, let's say, the family or whatever, I'm like, I can think many times. I've thought to myself, why did he do that? No, I don't agree with that. I think that was a bad decision. I look at that, I'm like, I think that was a bad decision. And then the first time that happens, where you genuinely feel like your dad dropped the ball, it's like life changing for you because you never expected that your dad could make such a mistake or make a bad decision. It's like, whoa. So this man isn't who I thought he was. That's how it feels. It's like he isn't who I thought he was. And then I don't know. I don't know how you come to a place where, listen, I'm not trying to be religious here, but I can say this sincerely. It's just the grace of God and getting closer to God that help me humanize my parents.
There are three phases in every son's life, son-father relationship
Yeah.
life. The first stage is where the son idolizes the father. That is Superman. That is everything. That is the best thing after, sliced bread. And then when the child, like you said, gets to a point where they see an obvious flaw from the father, you're like, it shatters their world.
Mhm.
And then they get to the second phase where they start to villainize the father. They start to call his choices and actions into question. And then when the child gets to a point where he or she, or in this case, he gets to be the one on the receiving end of those options to choose from, and realizes just how complex it is. That
Mhm.
sometimes you can have four options to choose from, and all four will land you in trouble. The child begins to humanize the father.
Truthfully, the only reason why I've reached that stage, and the reason why the stage of vilifying my dad did
Yeah.
not last long for me, was because at the same time I was going through that process, I was going through a process where I was getting closer to God. Like I say, okay. So that process of getting closer to God helped me see things in a different light. I can genuinely tell you now that the relationship I have with my dad now, or
Yeah.
how I look at him now, I think it's the best I've ever looked at him in my life.
There's this naivete that comes with not understanding the nuance of life, and then you're just expecting random stuff. And then he sometimes has to bend over backwards to keep up appearances,
Mhm.
but over time it gets tiring.
Of course it
You
does. Of
know,
course it does. And the fact is that I can see who he really is now. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because you said that sometimes it's we all want to be looked at, especially if we're going to be fathers. I can imagine being a father, although I'm not one yet. I mean, in spirit I am. But I mean, I can imagine wanting my kid to look at me like, okay, you're some type of superhero or whatever. But it's funny because that's also a lesson that I've learned, that I would rather let them know from a young age that, hey man, look, your dad is not everything that you think he is, because I realize that ultimately they need to look at their father in heaven, and I'm not trying to be preachy, but they need to look at him as a gold standard, not me, because if they have me as a gold standard, it's going to crush their world eventually,
but
100%.
I don't think that's necessarily the truth. The thing is, even with our best interests in heart as fathers, we will still fall short.
My point is,
So your job isn't to educate your kids that you are faulty. They will find out one way or the other. Your
but isn't it
job,
better to humble yourself than to be humbled?
it is not, you don't even have to humble yourself. Life comes at all of us
That's what I'm saying.
eventually. So I'm just saying, your job as a father is to be as perfect in their eyes for as long as possible. Do what that does for them. You might not agree with this, or you might not see this in your own peculiar case, but every child gets their esteem from the perception of who their daddy is. And that is the same thing that we preach to people in Christ as well. Who I am isn't determined by how much I've got in my bank account. It is based on who my father is. So if my father gives me the impression that, oh, he's this frail, vulnerable, weak father, it also colors how I see life.
Here's where I disagree. I don't believe that you should be frail or be like vulnerable. You should be a man. I believe in being a man, being strong and being competent and everything.
Yep.
That's what a man is. But at the same time, I don't believe in being unrealistic. Because when we talk about perfect, you said nobody's perfect. But then I ask you the question, what is perfect? Is perfect the illusion of being superior, or are you closer to being perfect when you have the illusion of being superior in every aspect, or you juxtapose that with understanding or being or fitting the role that you're supposed to play perfectly. So if as a father, right, I'm a protector, I'm a provider, I do all these things, my kids look at me that way, but at the same time I let them know that as good as I am, there is a standard beyond me, because I'm looking at life from a spiritual lens, and when I look at my life, I know that anything meaningful that has become of me came from that spiritual lens. While I had these illusions of material things, it's such a facade. It's
No, no,
so
it's not. It's
material stuff I'm
you
speaking
know,
about.
yeah, no, but it isn't a facade. I'm saying effectively that if you are a father, your job is to represent the idea of perfect as long as you possibly can. The reason is, by the time your kids realize, oh, you are not perfect, it offers them a longing. What else is perfect? And that's when Christ can step in adequately. But if you already present to them a flawed version of who a father is, even if we preach a storm of how much a father God is to us, their reference point is already corrupted.
Okay, so okay, I get your point, and let me go back, circle back, and rephrase, because when we're speaking about vulnerabilities, I think I'm thinking about it in a different aspect. I'm not saying that you show your kid you should go up there and say, "Oh, I'm suffering with this and this." Like, no, absolutely not. I believe, like you said, you should be as strong as you can. But I also believe in preaching to them that whatever is good about you and all that is good about you that they see comes from a higher source than you. So I'm just, my own perspective is just, don't let them think that you are the highest source. I'm not saying show them your weakness and go like you're an
That,
alcoholic or
sorry,
whatever.
that you are the highest standard, you mean?
At the highest standard, right? So I mean, yeah, the source of all good. I mean,
Yeah.
there's something above you. So if you are an alcoholic, of course you're not supposed to show that to your kids or whatever. No, in fact, now that you explained it that way, I completely agree. But I just want to have an emphasis that, okay, you see your dad, you love your dad, you think your dad is great. You know why your dad is great? Because he follows the big boss, the real big boss. You know, he's following Jesus, and that's why he is this the way he is. So then when you explained it the way you just explained it, I was like, okay, I get your point. I don't think I was looking at it from that perspective, because what I meant is just to illustrate that, okay, your dad is great, right? You want to be like your dad. You know what? Yeah, you can be like your dad, but you can even be better than your dad if you do this and this and this and follow this standard, which will be difficult for a kid to see when they're young,
To comprehend,
to
yeah.
comprehend. But yeah, I mean, I think so, because I may come across as being overly spiritual, but this is just the truth. So
Most people don't realize this. Everything we have, the relationship we have with our kids, is a similitude of our relationship with the Father. And the kids might not understand the concept of God just yet, like you said, but it is incumbent on us to represent God in their lives for as long as we possibly can. But eventually it is a spiritual battle that we are facing, from perversions that are being introduced to the world we live in, to everything that we do, including going out and coming in. It is a spiritual exercise. So don't ever apologize for being too spiritual. It is, everything is
it's
spiritual,
spiritual.
and then unfortunately the physical that we live out here is heavily influenced by the spiritual. And then it's almost like you have a dirt on your face, and you see it on the mirror. You don't clean the dirt from the mirror. You clean it from your face, and then the mirror corrects itself. And the same thing applies. Our lives, as we live out now physically, is the mirror. It is mirroring our lives
It's
in the
been the spirit.
spirit.
That's a
So
good analogy.
so
That's a good
don't
analogy.
don't ever apologize for being too spiritual or anything.
No, That's a great analogy. First of all, I want to remember that, but it's not even so much about apologizing. Thank God you understand this, But the thing is, you speak to the average man or the average woman, right? And especially you're involved in content creation, so you know this. If you speak to a person who does not understand who God is as a father, does not understand who Jesus Christ is, you say certain things to them and you're like, they probably think to themselves, man, this guy is just extra. How I know this is also true is because even Christians feel this way depending on where they are at in their relationship. A lot of people believe in God. They know God is real. Great. But they don't have a relationship with God. So when people are talking about these deeper spiritual things,
feels
feel
strange.
strange. It's like, oh yeah. This guy is like, okay. And then and just to digress for a second, I find this very sometimes I was thinking about this today, funny enough. I find this very it's something I ask God. I'm like, God, I really want to talk to these people and tell people the truth. But I always wonder to myself, how are they going to perceive it when they think this person is speaking of a different dimension and they cannot comprehend why I'm constantly speaking about things in the spirit from a spiritual lens? They can't.
You don't speak to people for where they are. You speak to people for where they are going
Mm-hmm.
to.
Mm-hmm.
The people that tune into this podcast, some of them aren't fathers yet. Some don't even want to have kids at all. But on this podcast, we speak to their potential. They might not be there yet, but your speech to them, your video, your content to them is giving them a foretaste of what is a possibility in the future. Now, in the present tense, it might feel like he's preachy, he's all, but give them time. Give them time. They will eventually get to that point where they're like, oh, I get what Gideon was saying 4 or 5 years ago. The same thing applies with fatherhood and the son. So that's something that I don't even bother about. If I feel something deeply in my spirit, I say it. It might go right over your head. That's absolutely fine. This is an evergreen content. 50 years from today, this is still going to be relevant. So, but people who don't need it now can come back in the future
You're absolutely right.
and get it.
You're absolutely right. I agree with that. That's a very solid point because immediately you said that I thought about the fact that a lot of things that I think about, listen, my parents today, I appreciate now that I didn't appreciate then. It's funny. My mom used to say that to me when I was growing up. She'll say, you don't understand it now, but you don't understand it now, but you understand it later. She used to say that like a lot, if I remember correctly. And then it was so funny to me when I started to get older, and especially when you go out of the house and you start to see certain things. I'm like, man, thank God I grew up this way. You were making the point, about kids today or young people or people in general, and you see how people behave, and you're like, oh, okay, I thank God that
I'm not them.
that I'm not them, and I grew up in this way. And at the same time, I've learned not to be condescending because they didn't grow up how I grew up. So they see life through their own completely different lens. And I want to be understanding enough so that I can relate to them and tell them if they're doing something wrong, this is why it's wrong. So I used to have this somewhat condescending attitude where I'll be like, look at these people, look at the kids, they're rude, they're to their parents, they're this and that. And then when you realize how hypocritical you are again, then you're like, okay, hold on one second, let's just be calm here
In that
and
regard,
understand.
in that regard, I'm not. I refuse to be understanding.
What regard is that?
Regardless of people who are badly behaved.
No, but when I say understanding, you have to understand how they grew up.
Yes, I understand how they grew up, but that understanding does not extend to a point where I am merciful towards them. I can be gracious to them as to not to react, but deep in my heart, I'm going to judge you for your bad behavior. The reason is this: even if you weren't properly raised, it is incumbent on you to decide how you live your life as an adult, as a functioning adult. You can't always blame your parents for things that you are doing today as an adult.
But some of them don't even blame their parents. They think that their parents were correct because that's how they grew up. So that's the reference that they have. So they do something bad and they think it's good because their parents allowed them to do it. So it's like you can judge them for it because bad is bad and good is good. So we judge. We say this is bad.
Yes,
we don't lie.
So if we had an objective standard of what is good and what is bad,
Yeah.
if they continue to do what is bad and use their home as a reference point for making it good, then it is all on them. I mean, I'm saying that in very objective areas where this is
Mm.
obviously wrong, and then you as an adult keep perpetuating that same behavior, then it is on you. But if you are raised in a very objective standard of what is good and what is bad, if they continue to do what is bad and use their home as a reference point for making it good, then it is all on them. I mean, I'm saying that in very objective areas where this is obviously wrong, and then you as an adult keep perpetuating that same behavior, under the guise of, oh, this is how I was raised. I don't rate you.
But the thing is that what we find objective, some people find subjective, even though it is objective.
Yeah.
So truth is objective. Truth is not my opinion, or this is like, truth is truth. But some people think truth itself is subjective, which is a lie. But how do you convince them that it's a lie if that's what they've been told? If they think that that's what it is. So you have to be graceful in how you relate the truth to people. Not that you lie to them,
Yeah.
but you have to at least listen to them so you understand where they're coming from. You know why I say this? I had a conversation recently with a young man, a friend of mine. And when Charlie Kirk, as you know, right, passed away, I posted a tribute to Charlie, and he was upset about it, and he unfollowed me. And I'm like, this guy's my friend. We used to hang out all the time. And I reached out to him. I'm like, bro, what's up? And he explains why he unfollowed me. And for the first time in my life, instead of being like, okay, you can do what you want, I'm not even angry. Just go ahead. It's like God put something in me that was like, just listen to him. And I listened to him, and then I explained to him how I felt, and we were able to have an amicable conversation, and he understood better. So it's like, people, listen, you cannot. It's a bit unfair to how would I say? You know, they say the first 7 years of a child's life are highly significant, and even in the Bible,
Okay.
you train up a child the way he should go, and when he goes, those early years are so important. So you cannot blame every adult for some of the traits you see in them now. If you're taught something, you know what? I give them more credit than I give myself for good behavior, because they came from a place that was harder to learn good behavior. You know what I mean? It's like a person who grew up in a whorehouse, and she gives her life to Christ. She is actually more of a representation of the grace of God than somebody who was born in a Christian home.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. However, behavior modification is different from accountability. You can acknowledge that, okay, I have this XYZ background, and that's why I'm acting the way I'm acting. But you can't always blame your father or your mother for those things 30, 40 years down the line. Because the first step of finding a solution to a problem is identifying the problem itself. Now, if society has been gracious enough to point you out and listen, this thing here is societally unacceptable. The water society has told you that. And then you, because you want to hold on to your upbringing, still continue to perpetuate that behavior. I can't indefinitely extend grace towards you.
Right. But what would you say, for instance, like in terms of courtesy, right, which is like a lesser issue, but I think it's an important issue. Like, for instance, if you have kids who speak to their parents, young kids, and they are very rude to their parents, right? But their parents are tolerant of it, and there is no societal punishment for it.
There is,
right?
but
There is in a sense that of okay, it will affect you as you grow older and whatnot. But I'm saying in general, you can get away with talking like this. Most of the kids today, I won't say most of the kids, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of kids, they are like the bosses in their homes in some ways, right? Now, you know this is wrong because of your upbringing, and you would be aghast when you see such a thing. But to these kids, it's normal. How would you combat a situation like that?
the first thing is, these kids don't say that's normal. Most of them do it because they know they will get away with it. It is not normalized to them. It's like,
But normalized means you know that something
normalized. It
is
is
regular.
no normalized means this is how it should be, and there is no other reality apart from this. It is not normal for politicians to steal public funds, right? You and I can agree on that. We know it's not normal. They know it's not normal. Every other person knows that's not normal. However, they are also aware that they can get away with it. So they keep on doing it.
So you think the kids know better?
Absolutely. 1000% they know it.
But these things are cultural.
No, it's not cultural, because those same kids go to the office,
Yeah.
and they are properly behaved.
Not all of them.
No,
Not all of them.
I know. Okay, I mean, but
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, but the thing is, the marketplace, be it office, be it with a podcast, or be any other career they choose, has its norms. And those kids, even in school, conform to the norms that is required for success in those regards.
But not all of them.
The ones that do not suffer the consequences.
Yes.
Their upbringing at home did not offer them any sort of consequence for their bad behavior, which is why they continued. But later, sooner or later, they get to an environment like, listen, bro, you can come so far, but that behavior, it ends here. And you will see those same people behave more cautiously towards their bosses than they do to their parents.
True, but
It is because they understand that at the workplace they cannot get away with it, but at home
they can't get
they
away.
can't get
But
away with it.
I remember about the time I was about 17, 18.
Yeah,
And I don't know, for some reason, I just started to get closer to my dad. You know, my dad was my dad. You know, sometimes he's serious, sometimes he's joking with us, like a normal dad. But then around that time when I was about to go off to university and everything, I remember we traveled one time from Gambia to Senegal, and I spent some time with him, like maybe a few days. And we would just walk, like go to a place, and we would just talk. And he talked to me, not just as a kid anymore, he was talking to me as a boy who's becoming a man.
right.
You know, and I remember that transition, and it meant a lot to me to have that, because it was like, you know, I can confide in my dad now. It's no longer this boundary where I can't say some things to him anymore, because he knows that, okay, this boy is going off to go somewhere. I'm not with him anymore. He's going to make life decisions. He's going to make good decisions, bad decisions. I couldn't think that that's what he was thinking, but now looking back, I understand that that's what he understood. So, and to be able to talk to him and be like, okay, this is what I think about this. A very good a memory I have that stuck with me, and I'll share here. One time I was having a conversation with him, one of these walks, just talking, and I said, you know, this people are doing this and this. I would never do that. And my dad just patiently listened. He listened to everything I was saying. I was like, you know, when at some point in your life, it's easy for you to say you would never do a thing or do this, and you will never know what it's like until you're actually in that position. And I remember him saying that. I was like, that was not maybe the response I expected from what I was saying, but it stuck with me. And many years later, when I did some things that I said I will never do, I was like, oh, okay,
I see what
I see what he was talking about. So for me, that also made him, I don't want to use the word like a superhero, but the fact that he was honest enough to break down life for me in that sense was valuable. Would I have liked to be able to speak to him from a younger age that way? Yes. So like if I'm a dad now, I would like my kids to confide in me about certain things, but at the same time, like you said, you have to be able to draw a boundary and be like, okay, I can listen to you, I can hear what you're saying, but if I said no, I mean no. You know, like this is what I'm saying. Like this, you have to lay down the law sometimes, but at the same time, I think if you're able to be
an attentive father.
attentive, but I definitely would never want to be the type of dad that I see common today. And I say this without any disrespect to Western people.
Oh, there's I. He doesn't disrespect. I do, but yeah.
All right. But it's just like, man, I mean, I see some dads talking to their kids like, I don't know how to explain it, man. You see it too. It's like,
Yeah,
I don't know how to explain it.
it's not. I don't. I don't believe in the African way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is moderation,
Exactly.
because by the time you give kids an impression that your kids are supposed to father you or to raise you, kids are you're supposed to raise your kids, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So outsourcing decision makings, outsourcing very important, crucial life decisions to kids is a problem that has, metastasized into things like, oh, a 12-year-old can decide whether he or she wants to cut off his or her
Yeah.
genitalia. That's a child that young doesn't have the right to make that kind of choice, because they don't have a full grasp of the consequences that come with actions. So I mean, I am not, I'm not apologetic about it. I'm very clear. I am an African father. I raised you firmly, because a time will come when the kids can no longer be raised. You will only have a very narrow window of instilling as much of your values into your child before they are out into the world. And then the world would expect that you've done your job. They would expect that you've had home training.
Yeah.
They would expect that you've been taught fortitude, ability to hear no without losing self-esteem. But if you've been so caged and coddled growing up that the first no you hear gives you a mental breakdown, then you're not ready for the world. I mean, suicide is a very sensitive issue these days. But unfortunately, some people are raising kids who are going to be suicidal in the future.
Are
Unfortunately,
gonna be what?
suicidal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life happens to all of us, but your what's the word I'm looking for? Your fortitude is what determines how you deal with it. For those of us who were fortunate enough to have our parents grow with us, are still with us. Take as much time as you can, call them as often as you can, glean wisdom from them as much as you can, because the day will come sooner than you would like it, that they will not be here anymore, and you would wish they were. My man,
Been a
thank
pleasure,
you.
man. Thank you for having me,
Let's
man.
do this again, sir.
You guys don't even know how many conversations we've had off air that are longer than this. You won't even imagine.
Yeah.
Wow.